Be joyful, said St. David in his last sermon. Can I be joyful by command? Well, I think we can learn, and I want to suggest that there are three ways in which we can learn to experience joy. The first is through gratitude. The second is through giving yourself away. And the third is through constructing something on which to rejoice. Not my words, far too clever for me, but it's a good sentence. May I take you back to the story of the woman knitting with which we finished the last talk. She'd been struggling with prayer for years, trying to get it right. It was only when she was given permission, and so gave herself permission, to approach prayer in a totally new way, to think of prayer differently, that she made a breakthrough. But the thing that is the same in a man in the water, in the waves, and the woman knitting, is that they both relaxed and said, I can just enjoy this. This is my time of being here, myself, relaxed, with God. Prayer in this totally informal way would not have been strange to Brother Lawrence. In his book, The Practice of the Presence of God, he wrote, I have abandoned all particular forms of devotion, all prayer techniques. My only prayer practice is attention. I carry on an habitual, silent, and secret conversation with God that fills me with overwhelming joy. Well, actually, he did still have to go to the chapel, so it's not entirely true. But what he was saying is he realized it wasn't about techniques, it was about relationship. So in the small mundane tasks of his life, Brother Lawrence paid attention to his relationship with God, and that gave him overwhelming joy. What do we mean by joy? It's often used in the same breath as the word happiness, but I think joy, God-given joy, is different. Every human being wants to be happy, albeit in different ways. But why is it that some people who seem to have everything that you would imagine would make them happy are so deeply unhappy, whilst others who have very little or whose lives are full of difficulties shine out with joy? The Dominican monk, author, and founder of A Network for Grateful Living, David Steindl-Rast, says the difference is gratitude. He said, gratitude comes when we're given something that's really valuable to us. We haven't bought it, we haven't earned it, we haven't worked for it. It is freely given. When something comes to me that I really value and it is freely given, I feel gratitude spontaneously rising in my heart. And this is why some people who seem to have everything can be so unhappy, and others who appear to have very little sometimes have such joy. Some have not experienced what they've received as a valuable gift freely given, but rather as something that they have earned in some way and so deserve. They don't feel gratitude for it, they feel they are entitled to it because I'm worth it. So, if gratitude is a response to gift, does this mean that we're not going to feel joy very often? Because we only feel joy when we feel gratitude on receiving something precious to us. On the contrary, Steindl-Rast says, we can receive these gifts daily. With practice, we can become people who live gratefully. We do this, again, sorry to sound like a stuck record, by paying attention. We learn by waking up, by experiencing, by becoming aware that every moment is a given moment. Every moment is a gift. Indeed, the key to the whole thing is the knowledge that every moment is a given moment, and that we can become people who live gratefully and experience joy in the opportunities offered moment by moment. Here's another story. Some years ago, my congregation were invited by a local synagogue to come as guests to the festival of Tu B'Shevat. I hope that's the right pronunciation, which is one of 4 celebrations in the Jewish New Year calendar. And this one is especially aimed at celebrating agriculture and trees. We sat in a circle and were told that plates were going to come round to us with segments of satsumas, followed by a plate with hazelnuts, and then one with dates. When the plates came round, we were just to take one of each thing. So one segment of satsuma, one nut, one date. Bit mean, I thought. Next instruction, when we had our satsuma, was to look at it, to feel it, to smell it. Then we were allowed to put it in our mouth, not bite it, put it in our mouth, roll it around on our tongue. What did it taste like? Actually, you try this at home, it doesn't have much of a taste. What was the texture like? Slightly fuzzy texture. I think that's the best way to describe it. And then we were allowed to bite it. My goodness. I tasted that segment of satsuma. We had to do the same with the nut and then with the date. It was such a powerful experience, and it's way over 10 years ago, that I still remember how vivid the taste of the satsuma was. All my senses were involved. It was an absolute delight in miniature. And it taught me what I think it was meant to teach me, that normally I simply do not attend to what I'm eating, and so have little sense of gratitude. I've got used to food, and I take no notice of it for the most part. We have to learn to struggle against something called habituation, which is simply the habits we learn that make us unaware. In my family at the moment, there are 2 little people. One is my granddaughter, who is 3.5 years old, and the other is my great niece, who is just over 6 months old. My great niece lives entirely in the moment, and everything immediate is a curiosity and a delight. But when I leave the room, I don't exist for her. I was with her a few days ago, and she was given a wooden spoon with which to bang a saucepan. But she decided on this occasion she didn't want to bang the saucepan. She wanted to look at the spoon and put the spoon in her mouth, and then look at the spoon, and then put a different part of the spoon in her mouth, ad infinitum, totally absorbed in this thing. My granddaughter was like this a couple of years ago, but gradually already she's become used to, habituated to the many things around her. And she already takes lots of things for granted, which is quite sad in a way, but it is right. As we learn more, receive more information, learn to function, we have to become habituated to a certain extent. Our knowledge and experiences have to become part of us, or we wouldn't be able to live in our complex world. We would never be able to drive or shop or cook or negotiate a journey or bring up our own children. But the downside of habituation is, as I've already said, that we get so used to things that we don't see or taste them anymore. And then on top of this, as we all know, our lives become so complex and we end up spinning so many plates that we become problem-solving machines, living more and more in our heads, cut off from everything that surrounds us and offers itself to us. When Jesus asked Bartimaeus what he wanted him, Jesus, to do for him, Bartimaeus answered, "Lord, that I might see again." Matthew's Gospel has that word, again. And I'm always fascinated by that little word. This is a man who had been able to see and had lost his sight. And is that not true of all of us? This might also be part of what Jesus meant when he said that we needed to become like little children again to enter the kingdom of heaven. We need to learn to see again, to wonder again, to receive again as a little child, which means to slow down like a child and take time, waste time. Then we will see the opportunities of the present moment and be in a place where we can receive them. We will see the abundant gifts being freely given, poured out to us in every moment. We will be awake to hear the bird's song, or present to see the little child who smiles at us in the shopping centre. We will hear wisdom unexpectedly in the mouth of a stranger, or taste our food. How do we move forward with this? Well, first we have to understand that everything is gift. We said that actually in our opening prayer. All that I am, all that I have, all the talents, the education, my family, my friends, everything is gift. Often I claim these things as my own, my talents, my cleverness, my hard work, and make myself miserable as the inevitable comrades of such wrong thinking, pride, envy, the sin of comparison, disappointment, and the feeling of abject failure raise their ugly heads. But when I remember that all I have is God-given, and that God is loving me into being moment by moment, not only do I feel gratitude, which leads to joy, but I can enjoy my talents. If somebody says, "You did that well," I don't have to say, "Oh, no, not really." And I don't have to worry if nobody says I did something well, because anything that I do well is because I was first given it. And therefore I can enjoy it as a gift. Not enjoy it because, hey, aren't I good at this? Then I'm taking it for myself. I'm stealing it from God. I'm trespassing on what belongs to God. But when we do trespass, and we all do, when the vanity rises up, there is something that comforts. And this is not really so much part of my talk, but I had to share it because I love it. Meister Eckhart says, this is about when we sin, God holds each of us by a string. When we sin, we cut the string, but God ties it up again, making a knot. And each time our wrongdoing cuts the string, God ties another knot, drawing us closer to himself. Isn't that a lovely idea? I just love that idea. The second thing I mentioned was giving ourselves away. Generosity. Martin Buber, some of you will know, wrote a wonderful book called I and Thou. And when we get into the place of habituation, we are in the place of I and it. Everything becomes an it to me. I am the centre of everything, and everything else is an it. And we have to live in that it world, or we'd never get anything done. But when you give yourself away, when you quite consciously look at the person in front of you and see them as other, as thou, as holy and sacred, and attend to them, then you're giving yourself away. When you practice that, you're doing what Jesus would have understood by the word mercy in his language, which was to stand in another person's skin and look at the world through their eyes. When we forget ourselves and give ourselves away, in an extraordinary way, not only do we receive something from other people, but we also find ourselves. It is the most extraordinary thing. And we are called to give ourselves away and to receive the other as gift. Third thing I suggested earlier was that one of the main differences between the experience of happiness and joy is gratitude at a gift of freely given. But what of those times when we feel so down that we have no sense of gratitude. We might be so weary and wrung out that we've ceased to feel altogether. And I certainly had times like that when I was a priest. If you can't feel anymore, you need to go and talk to somebody. In his poem, Ash Wednesday, T.S. Eliot has the line, "I rejoice having to construct something on which to rejoice." How good are we at constructing something on which to rejoice when the world seems very dark? My husband once said to me that however bad things got, he knew he could say to God at the end of each day, "Thank you that I have a roof over my head. Thank you that I have food in my belly. Thank you that I am safe." Of course, as I read those words today, we know that in the Ukraine they can't even say that. But they will be able to find something to say thank you for. St. Paul, in his wonderful letter to the Philippians, called on his audience to rejoice 16 times in total, despite being imprisoned and chained to 2 guards night and day. In his letter, he gives a recipe for rejoicing. "Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honourable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence and if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things." Think about these things. Your thoughts matter. They lead to powerful emotions for good or ill. Try to see them arise. Interrogate them to see if they speak the truth. Often they don't. Take control of your thoughts. Now, the interesting thing is that taking control of thoughts was a very serious part of the discipline of the Desert Fathers and the early monastic communities. In the silence of contemplative prayer, they would watch as their thoughts inevitably rose up. Little by little, they began to recognize patterns of thoughts, very boring old patterns that come up again and again, behavioral patterns, repeated habits. They would see what we all see when we practice contemplative prayer: fragmented attention, the inability to stay focused, self-centeredness, pride, resentment, judgmentalism, self-criticism, unforgivingness, old memories and wounds constantly rehearsed. A reason, you might think, not to practice that sort of prayer. But on the contrary, the Desert Fathers saw it as a very valuable ongoing lesson in self-awareness, knowledge of self. This is who I am. But I can choose, in that moment when I catch myself in this thought, to be different. When I become aware of these thoughts arising, I can turn to Christ. I can cry out for help. I can do as Paul suggests, think of the good things. I can count my blessings and be filled with gratitude. There's a lovely story of a nun who was trying to learn contemplative prayer under the guidance of the founder of the centering prayer movement, Thomas Keating. After one session, she came to him. She'd been trying to pray contemplatively for 30 minutes, and she said to him in despair, "I shall never be able to do this. I lost concentration at least 100 times. And Thomas Keating said to her, "How wonderful. 100 opportunities to turn back to Christ." It is not failure when our minds go racing around, when we fall into habits of thought. It's much more like being unfit. When we turn to Christ again and again, we are exercising our spiritual muscles. We are teaching ourselves new muscle memory. We are learning to say no to the negative and yes to gratitude, and that which gives us emotional as well as spiritual health. Also, as it appears St. Paul did in prison, sometimes it's important to lean into our experiences, even the tough ones, perhaps especially the tough ones. What is God trying to tell me in all this? In my experience, everything taken honestly to God in prayer bears fruit and changes the outcomes. Remember that God is the presence that protects from nothing, inasmuch as we still have to be there, and we're all going to suffer, but sustains us in everything. God is the presence that protects us from nothing while sustaining us in everything. What helps more than anything is at the beginning of our day, however dark and dreary it seems, and however distant God might feel, to spend time quietly resting in God. Then at the end of the day, try praying the examen. The examen, I'll just speak to you about that in a moment. It's only 5 minutes that you need. You try to wake up to where you felt most alive that day. You've got it here on your sheets. There's a whole number of questions you can ask. So you ask of yourself, for what am I most grateful? And then you ask yourself what you're least grateful for. Or, when did I give and receive the most love? And when did I give and receive the least love? Okay? So you're reflecting on your day. But the most important bit, at least when you're starting out on learning how to do the examen, is to do the positive. And what you will find is that things come back to you, things you may not even have noticed very much at the time, will come back to you, and the taste of them, and the feeling of them, and that you will experience them again. You will experience more gratitude, more joy than you felt at the time. On the very worst day, we might find we rejoice having to construct something on which to rejoice. But having to find something to say thank you for leads to remembrance. And remembrance leads us back into the original moment. And the reliving of the original moment leads to gratitude, and gratitude leads to joy. Yes, joy is a habit of mind that we can train ourselves in, with patience and with that terrible thing, practice. We won't go away today and be able to manage it, but do it every day, and we will. Now, because we have taken more time than we meant to take, I'm going to suggest that you just take these away if you are in a hurry and can't stay. But we're going to give you 2 minutes now, and I'm just going to tell you what to do with the 2 minutes. Then we're going to,
Alison,
go straight through into it.
We do have a little bit longer.
Oh, right.
Actually, it's only 22, so we can have the 10 minutes if you'd like us to.
Right. Well, I think apart from anything, Rosie deserves the 10 minutes for all her beautiful prayer stations. Okay, 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes. I must. Right. The bishop says.
It's better if it comes from you, I think.
The bishop says, please don't go away before the worship. If you can wait this extra 20 minutes, remember what you give, you'll get back. Right, so you have time now, folks, to find the two prayer stations, Be Joyful and New Life in the Desert, or go back to something that's already spoken to you. You have time, if you want, just to do a little bit of this. And I must just tell you, this is a great little book, if you haven't got it. Or you could do the gratitude exercise. You could start the gratitude exercise, which is one of the simplest exercises in the world. But if one of you does this and can come back to me after 10 minutes and say, it didn't work for me, I won't believe you. Thank you.
So we'll call you back to your seats in about 10 minutes for the final worship. If you do have to go early, please remember to take the small gift and perhaps one or two others for colleagues who haven't been able to be here.